Good afternoon, everyone. The silence is rather deafening, and so I think we're going to start a minute early here. Welcome. It's a pleasure to see our gallery full, and we hope that you come away tonight understanding the system better and satisfied with this meeting. We actually have two meetings tonight. The first one is a planning matter, and the second one is to consider a proposal to implement an administrative penalty system bylaw. It's really there won't be a vote on that tonight. It's just largely for information, but we will have a brief recess between these two parts of the meeting, and it's up to you. I know most of you are interested in the planning item, but you might also be interested in the second part, and you're welcome to stay for that as well. So I'm going to call us to order and invite everyone to stand, and this will be the best rendition of O Canada we've had in a long time. I'm going to call now on Deputy Mayor Keaveney to give us our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone. We would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis people and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters.
Thank you. And now I'll just invite everyone to join me in a moment of silent reflection on our business at this time. Thank you very much. Looking around the horseshoe, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? I see none, but if it occurs to you at some time this evening, please bring it forward then. And now we're ready to start our public meeting. A meeting to learn about a proposal to amend the land use planning permissions applying to certain lands in the municipality of Meaford. Council is legally required to make decisions that conform to the county and local official plans. Our policies encourage us to reach out to community stakeholders to gather information. We have a variety of legal tools available to us that we can apply to development to help us manage change in a positive manner with as minimal an impact as possible. And your insights can be part of what informs our direction. Those in attendance for today's meetings will have an opportunity to speak in person or remotely if pre-registered through Zoom. This meeting is not structured as a dialogue between speakers and the applicant. However, the applicant may take the opportunity to respond to comments toward the end of the meeting if they wish. Note that in many cases, formulating responses may require that staff carry out research after the meeting on the matters raised and provide answers following the meeting or through their report to council. So I'll now call today's public meeting to order. It's a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for lands located at 279 St. Vincent Street in Meaford. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by the Planning Act. Based on the rules of the Act, there must be at least 20 days' notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. Notice of the zoning bylaw amendment was issued on April 14th, 2026, giving the required 20 days' notice. So first, I'm going to ask Denise McCarl, Manager of Planning Services for the Municipality of Meaford, to make some opening remarks. Denise?
Thank you, Your Worship. So it's a little unusual that Helene and I would tag team, but we're going to do it today because we know that there's a lot of public interest, and I just want to make sure that the number of people that might be joining us virtually and also in our gallery today have as much information as possible about this process. So I just want to welcome everyone in the gallery. I know there's folks in the hallway, and I just want to make sure that they understand, and council is assured that we will go and get anyone in the hallway who needs to speak at the appropriate time and make sure that everyone has a chance to do that. And just to reiterate, the purpose of the meeting is for us to gather information. So it's public's chance to speak with us, to speak with council, and no decisions are being made tonight. Helene is going to start giving a presentation in a few moments, and she's going to give sort of the basics on that, and then I'm going to fill in a few additional comments at the end about this particular application. And so the agent for the applicant is also here in person, and we understand that the applicant may be joining us virtually today. And we acknowledge as well that we've received quite a few comments already, and that we're in the process of going through those and delving into the issues that were raised. All of the comments have been forwarded on to council and form part of the record, the public record for the file. I think it's important to remind everyone that this is an important step in the planning process, but it's not the last step. It doesn't, it's not in 5 minutes that we'll be approving it or anything like that. We want to make sure people understand there's still time to make comments. Knowing that, though, we would appreciate if people tonight who are enjoying the presentation and they go away and think, wait a minute, I actually have things I didn't say. I didn't have a chance to speak, or now that I've had a chance, or maybe they're shy and they don't want to speak up at the podium, but they have lots of things to say in a written letter. That's absolutely fine. The public comment period is still open. And so absolutely go away and think about what you heard tonight and put those thoughts down on paper and provide a follow-up letter. And you can do that by email by contacting us the same way anyone else has already provided those comments. And we have in the presentation, we have the email address. It's planning@meaford.ca. This presentation is also on the website where we keep the council's calendar. If anyone wants to get a copy and they didn't know how to find that, they can look at it. If they just let us know, we can help point them in the right direction. And just to remind everyone, it doesn't have any difference whatsoever whether you speak at the public meeting or whether you write a letter or an email to us. They're all valid and equal. They all are a good way to get in touch with us about the proposal. And so I think the last thing I just wanted to note is that on applications like this that have some significant interest, and people in the gallery may have actually quite a few questions, we may not be able to answer those questions tonight. This isn't the format for kind of a question answer scenario, but what we're going to do is write down those questions and put together a question and answer document that we'll post on the website in where the materials for this application are held, the current developments page. If anyone doesn't know how to find that or is looked and they don't see it, they're, absolutely get in touch with us, and we will either give you a hard copy if you don't use websites, if you don't use the internet, or we can email it to folks who just can't find it. We'll send a link. So absolutely, we're going to post that in the next few days after we have a chance to put that together. And as I will now pass it on to Helena.
Let me ask staff if there's any. I don't think it's possible. Unfortunately, the system here is designed for people who are on remote, that we can talk back and forth. It doesn't do much to enhance. So I just encourage everyone to speak up when you are speaking, and because we hear it through the room, not through anything else. So The thing is, they're reading from their screens, their PCs, and I think that, but they will speak up. And those of you who are going to be addressing us, you can do that at the podium. We'll direct you when that time comes. So Helena, speak up.
Thank you, Your Worship. All right, so let's open up the public meeting. So the purpose of this public meeting is to explain the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, describe the intended use of the property, hear public questions and comments, and help council better understand the proposal before making a decision. And as Denise had noted, no final decision is being made at this meeting. So up on the screen here is the subject lands at 279 St. Vincent Street in Meaford. The property is zoned urban institutional. The permitted uses of the property are limited to what was legally existing as of September 21st, 2009, which is when the zoning bylaw came into effect. So this property is currently permitted a secondary school and accessory day nursery. So here are some proposal details. The property owner is requesting a zoning bylaw amendment to allow the former Georgian Bay Secondary School property to be used as a privately operated college. The proposal includes reuse of the existing school building as a post-secondary teaching facility, approximately 200 students enrolled per semester, construction of 3 on-site dormitory buildings to house both student and staff, and these proposed dorms are 11 meters in height, or approximately 3 stories. As part of this, along the eastern border, which we will show in a site plan in a few slides, they are asking for a reduction in the side yard setback from 4.5 meters to 4 meters. They're also proposing 120 on-site parking spaces, landscaping and internal circulation improvements. And this proposal is intended to adapt an existing institutional site for a new educational purpose rather than redevelop it for an entirely different use. And on the screen here are the proposed site-specific zoning permissions from the applicant. And I'll hand it back over to Denise. Thank you.
So I'm just going to go through a few things that are really particular to this application. But this first slide is just generally what is zoning and why do we have it? So almost every municipality, certainly in the Southern Ontario, has a zoning bylaw that determines what uses are allowed on the property. And they're usually categorized by things such as institutional, commercial, and then different residential categories, sometimes by number, R1, R2, R3, those sorts of things. That zoning determines what uses are allowed. So could someone tomorrow come and get a building permit for a dwelling, or could they come and get a building permit for a restaurant or a auto repair shop? And it also includes provisions for where the buildings can be located. And we usually characterize those as your setbacks and sometimes how large it can be, lot coverage and those sorts of things. Parking, landscaping, et cetera, are also included. So if a restaurant is, 100 square meters, it may require, I'm just making up a number, 25 parking spaces. So in this case, why are they here today? The applicant is here because what they are looking to do does not currently fall within the zoning that they have. So their only option is to rezone the property to request council give permission for that use. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So council is being asked to decide whether or not this use is appropriate on this property from a land use perspective. So is a college appropriate at this location? These are some example questions that we would ask ourselves as we're reviewing this. Is the scale of the proposal compatible with the surrounding uses? Are traffic and parking impacts manageable? Is the proposal consistent with the policies in the official plan? Are servicing, access, and site layout appropriate? So these are the only matters council would be considering when they're deciding on a zoning amendment. Basically, the impacts to infrastructure and, can we service the property? Is it in the right location? Those sorts of things. But council is not deciding on whether or not they like the programs that are proposed for the school. They're not evaluating the proposed school or the way they're going to be operating their instructors, whether they have credentials, and whether or not the institution is accredited. They don't license, so council's not licensing this school, and they're not deciding whether the institution should just exist at all, because it could be anywhere. It's just proposed here. And so those curriculum-related matters in the business plan of the applicant related to the school functions, their curriculum, what they'll be teaching and who will be teaching, are all under the provincial authority and not the municipality. Can you go to, yeah, thank you. So just normally we wouldn't get this much detail that planning staff would provide, but we really just wanted to make it clear that council's not deciding whether a private college is a good idea in and of itself and what kind of programs should be offered. Private colleges in Ontario are regulated by the province, and they fall into two categories, like vocational programs, degree granting programs, and those provincial responsibilities relate to things like what kind of courses you would have to take to get those programs, to get a diploma, the oversight of the school, and the zoning approval does not permit the school to operate in and of itself any more than other things that need a provincial license, just like a liquor license or something else that the province, or, a racetrack or a casino or things like that. So those things are separate, but they do often, so land use and zoning operate separately from licensing, but they often are happening in parallel. And it's important to know that the municipality can approve the zoning even whether or not the province has issued any license for this particular school. And it's not unusual for someone to get the site that they want for their business and then apply for a provincial approval. So I know that there's been questions about, well, why don't they have a license first? And it may be, and I'm not an expert in this part, but it may be that they can't get a license for something if they don't have a location, which would certainly make sense from the other aspect of the examples I provided. For example, a casino or a liquor license. You can't get a liquor license if you don't have a location that you are approved to use for a restaurant, for example. Next slide. And so I think it's really important that we provide this slide. This is our standard template, so this isn't anything new, but we just shows you where we are in the process. We process applications for zoning amendment within 90 days because that's what we're mandated to do by the province of Ontario. This step is basically what we're showing here is step 3 in the process, kind of a basic example of the process. We'll complete our review following this meeting and make recommendations to council, and then council would make a decision. And then there'd be an appeal period, and then this decision would be final, whether to approve or not approve. So tonight, as the next steps, we just want to reiterate that we will be reviewing the public comments. We'll prepare a recommendation report. That report will be put on the agenda, and if anyone's looking for that in advance, when the agenda is posted, we're happy to share that with anyone that reaches out to ask. Council will just consider the application at that future meeting, and then council may approve or modify or refuse the zoning amendment. If approved, additional approvals would still be required. In this case, a site plan approval, and they would need to get building permits for the additional buildings. Provincial licensing requirements would still apply before operation would begin. And then we also just wanted to make sure that you had the ability to get in touch with us. So I can also give a extension if anyone's looking for someone to phone. But any comments that are submitted after the public meeting, just like before the public meeting, planning@meaford.ca, and we will also take any requests to be notified of the decision if someone wants a written request. It's really, really hard to see this. We recognize that. I think we put this sort of site plan up so that folks who were looking at this on their own, if they want to download or look at the presentation separately, they'll be able to take a look at this again, but we can also have it up here for discussion purposes. And that shows the school where it is now, and then some dormitory buildings. The building on the south side is where the community garden is now. And on the east side, along the property line, about 4 meters away, as Helena noted, there'd be dormitories where parking and some of the green space is now, some of the grass is now. And so we also have a summary of the comments we received today, and Helena is going to provide that.
Thank you, Denise. So to summarize the comments received to date, the Historic Saugeen Métis had no concerns with the application. Grey County had no concerns with the application and have recommended incorporating sustainable vehicle charging. From the following members: Carly Farley, Richard Brock, Ann Kiefer, William Major, Jennifer Pendleton, Rick Smith, Gareth Brown, Gina Juniper Jaworski, Heather Murray, Emma Schmidt, and Andrew Shoemaker. So there has been some support for the application, but the majority of comments received to date have expressed concerns and are opposed to the proposal. The main concerns are that the requested permitted uses are overly broad and extend beyond a private college use. For example, adding a crisis residence or a hospital. There were concerns about the credibility of the proposed private college and the limited public information available about the college. Concerns are raised about rezoning the property without the college being accredited, and about the financial feasibility of a private college in today's climate when other colleges are downsizing. Other concerns related to the proposed on-site dorms include safety issues, noise concerns, and compatibility with the existing neighborhood. And there are also concerns about insufficient parking and traffic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand the applicant's planning consultant, Ron Davidson, is here to speak to us and to the application. Can someone turn his mic? Oh, you've got it.
I
Ron, that's
believe I'm
good.
on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ron Davidson. I am a professional land use planner. I'm here today representing the owner of the subject property. I filed the rezoning application on their behalf. Amanender Barge, he's the president of the company owning the subject property. He could not be here in person, but I believe he's joining us. I really hope he's joining us because he wants to say a few words. I'm going to be very brief here. I'm going to say a few things about the college. As Denise had indicated, I'll use in my words, she was saying a lot of the stuff about the background of the college, who they are, courses being offered, etc., is not relevant to the rezoning application. And having said that, there were lots of questions asked, and Amaninder is going to, he has a prepared speech, and hopefully he can be heard, and he's going to try to answer some of those questions in any event. So my speech is as follows. So his company bought the property, the former Georgian Bay Secondary School, as everybody is well aware, and he wants to operate a privately owned college. He is in the process of obtaining a license from the province, and advises that the final step is actually getting a site and a site inspection by the province, and that should be happening very soon. And the zoning, yes, needs to be in place. This is a learning facility that will offer post-secondary courses to prepare students for employment opportunities in various industries. They plan to launch a business-related courses in the fall of this year and gradually introduce more programs over the next 5 years. This will include both long-term and short-term courses, including continuing education to assist adults in upgrading and refining their skills. Their business plan is to have 200 students enrolled each semester, and that'll happen obviously once the school is up and running. As you heard, there will be 3 buildings, or there are 3 buildings proposed for student housing. The buildings will be 11 meters in height, and I should note that the zoning bylaw would typically allow for a 14-meter tall building in this zone. In terms of timing of the project, renovations have begun. They are starting with the cafeteria, library, administration, and office sections of the building. Other areas will be renovated gradually as needed. Amaninder expects to complete the renovations for the primary required areas this year, with work on other areas potentially continuing until 2030, which is only 3.5 years away. The residential component is also slated for completion by 2030. Again, that's all I'm going to say about the school itself. And in a minute, Meninder is going to, like I said, provide his comments that, again, aren't relevant to rezoning, but nevertheless, he wants to address some of the concerns raised by the neighbors. As you heard from the planners, the property is zoned urban institutional, or UI, and this only permits uses that existed September 21st, 2009. As such, the only thing that's permitted on the property is a school. I guess that would be a public school or Catholic school, and I think we heard a day nursery as well. So this proposal, and pretty much any proposal for this site, requires an amendment to the zoning bylaw. The proposed amendment would permit a private college and student residences, and yes, it would include other uses that are typically allowed in an institutional zone in other municipalities. This will allow for some flexibility in the possible future use of the site. I know there have been some concerns raised. We will obviously take those comments into consideration in terms of some of the other potential uses that are proposed for the site, or at least proposed to be rezoned for the site. I am just about done here. I'd like to add 3 things here. First of all, a traffic impact study was prepared at the request of the municipality, and it concluded that the traffic volumes associated with the proposed development can be more than sufficiently accommodated by the existing road network within the study area without any mitigation requirements. Secondly, there was a detailed site plan done, which is up on the screen. I realize it's hard to see, but if you haven't seen a copy, you can probably go on the municipal website, or you can get one sent to you. That shows the existing school, it shows parking, and it shows the proposed 3 dorms. And then lastly, I prepared a planning justification report as a professional planner, and I evaluated the proposal within the context of the policies of the Meaford official plan and a document at the provincial level known as provincial planning statement. As a planner, I can say that the proposed use of the lands as a college, including the student housing, does conform with the Meaford official plan and is consistent with the provincial planning statement. Mr. Mayor, that's all I have to say. I'm really hopeful that Armaninder is patched through because he wishes to speak for a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Amaninder, can you hear us? Are you online?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you hear me?
Okay, you are very loud, so maybe you can just back off a little bit from your microphone and not just be quite as loud. And
Okay.
so go ahead and start, and I may interrupt you just to get you to get
If I'm too loud.
your audio better adjusted.
Adjusted. Okay. Okay. So hello everyone. Thank you for giving me.
Just back off a little bit more, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I just got a little too much volume for, like, it's very loud in the room. So if you just back off a bit.
Sure. I'll try now. How is it? Is it better now?
That is better.
Okay. Perfect. So hello everyone. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I did go through some of the comments of the neighbors, and I wanted to provide some clarification. Some of the information that I'm going to talk about may not be relevant to the planning application, but I still thought it a good opportunity to clarify a few things. I'd like to start with introducing myself. My name is Amaninder Bharaj, and I am CEO of Travel Shield, which is a leading supplier of super visa insurance in Canada. I have been licensed financial advisor since 2007. And over the past 19 years, our organization has been successfully compliant with the provincial regulations in this highly regulated sector. Currently, we have over 1,000 licensed advisors contracted with us. I share this information as an assurance that I have extensive experience managing government regulations, procedures, and a large workforce. Regarding Toronto Excellence College, we are not an immigration firm, nor we are involved in visa processing or bringing an influx of international students. Our programs are designed for domestic students to succeed in their chosen career. We are currently undergoing the rigorous curriculum approval process with the Ministry of Colleges and Universities. There are some courses that we plan to offer that are going to be under 40 hours, which do not require any ministry approval. We are dedicated to this program success. For instance, Rasneet Bharaj is an Ontario certified teacher. We also own 97 acres in GTA, where we plan to open a larger campus in future. There are other property in Mississauga, which also be a part of our broader plan. For that reason, we have retained the name Toronto in our name of the institution. Meaford is just the beginning of our long-term plan. In next 15 to 20 years, we do plan to see multiple campuses, and Toronto will be part of that as well. We are committed to this. We are not going to quit in between. And we can assure the residents that we are all working in good faith here. Like, we are not trying to do any shortcuts or anything like that. Finally, I also want to clarify that I am not affiliated with MSG Canada Insurance or Toronto Centre of Excellence, as mentioned by some residents. Thank you for your time. That's all from me.
Thank you, Mr. Barge. There have been two pre-registrations to speak at this meeting by members of the public. So first, I'm going to call on Therese Defoy, who is in person. Therese, are you in the audience here? Is she in the hall, or we don't see her? So she was a pre-registrant and is supposed to be in person. We don't know where. If she does make it, we'll certainly put her on. So second, I'm going to call on Andrew Shoemaker, who is here in person. Andrew? And if you don't mind just giving us your name for the record.
My name is Andrew Shoemaker. I'm a plumber, so just bear with me here. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Andrew Shoemaker, and I'm a resident of Meaford. I'm here to express serious concerns about the proposed zoning amendment for the former Meaford High School property at 279 St. Vincent Street. This proposal would allow a private college and 3 dormitory buildings with 79 units, housing up to 236 students. For a municipality of our size, that represents a significant increase in density and demand on local services, and it warrants careful scrutiny. First, I want to address public consultation. While notice may have met the minimum legal requirement, it was not sufficient for a project of this scale. Many residents only heard about this through word of mouth. A development with impacts on infrastructure, traffic, and community character should involve broader and more transparent engagement with the entire municipality. Second, it's important to clarify what is actually being approved. This is not simply an application for a college. The proposed site-specific zoning permits a wide range of institutional uses beyond a school, including clinics, group homes, crisis residences, and other intensive uses. Council is not only evaluating this proposal, but establishing long-term permissions for the site that could extend well beyond the current concept. We also need to consider the broader context of post-secondary education in Ontario. The sector is currently facing significant uncertainty, particularly following recent changes to international student policies. Many institutions are downsizing, not expanding. So is it fair to ask, why is a new private college and a large-scale student housing being proposed here in Meaford? That leads to concerns about transparency, which we've heard. There are still unanswered questions about the ownership, leadership, and long-term plan for this institution. Public information links the applicants of this proposal to Travel Shield Canada, a company that provides insurance products specifically for international students and visitors to Canada. While that in itself is not improper, it does raise reasonable questions about how closely the proposed college and its recruitment strategy may be tied to those existing business interests. The name Toronto Excellence College also raises concerns, as it suggests a Toronto-based campus when in reality it would be located here in Meaford, almost 200 kilometers away from Toronto. That could create misleading expectations, particularly for international students who may not be familiar with the region. The scale of the residential component suggests that the success of the project is closely tied to student recruitment and sustained enrollment levels. Before approving zoning that enables this scale of development, council should have a clear understanding of how the institution plans to operate and grow, how students will be recruited, and whether the institution has the appropriate provincial authorization required to deliver the programs it is promoting. Without that clarity, there's a risk that the use as proposed may not materialize as described, leaving the property with permissions that could be used in ways that were not originally anticipated. Next is the condition of the existing building. It dates back to the 1960s, and documentation indicates asbestos is present. Before any approval, there should be a full hazardous materials assessment and a clear plan for remediation. Without that, we don't know whether this is truly a renovation project or if it could turn into a demolition and something very different later on. Infrastructure is another major concern. Our wastewater treatment plant is already operating at around 70 to 80% capacity, and upgrades are still years away. Adding potentially 236 residents before that capacity is available could put the municipality in a difficult position and may conflict with provincial planning requirements. Traffic and parking also needs serious attention. Given that this is the first development of this type in Meaford, the zoning bylaw does not contain specific provisions for post-secondary student residences. In that context, it is reasonable to assess this proposal as a mixed or multi-unit residential use when considering parking requirements. The proposal includes 79 residential units, many intended to house multiple students. Under typical standards for multiple unit dwellings, this would suggest a higher parking demand than what is currently proposed. In addition, local standards for secondary schools require approximately 4 parking spaces per classroom. With 15 classrooms proposed, this further illustrates the potential scale of parking demand associated with this development. While the supporting studies suggest that many post-secondary students do not own vehicles, those assumptions are typically based on urban settings with established public transit. Those conditions do not apply here in Meaford. In a rural community without public transportation, it is reasonable to expect a higher reliance on personal vehicles. For that reason, council and staff should carefully consider whether the proposed parking supply is appropriate for this use. If it is not, any reduction or cash in lieu approach should be supported by clear, evidence-based justification, including demonstrated impacts on surrounding streets and neighborhoods. If on-site parking is insufficient due to assumptions that students don't own vehicles, the impact will not be contained within the property. It will extend to surrounding residential streets, creating safety, congestion, and compatibility concerns. Finally, council needs to think about long-term precedent. Once zoning is changed, it stays. If this project doesn't proceed as planned, those permissions could allow for other high-density developments that the community never anticipated. To be clear, this is not opposition to growth or education, but growth needs to be responsible, transparent, and supported by infrastructure. At a minimum, I urge council to require confirmation of adequate wastewater and infrastructure capacity, a more detailed and locally grounded traffic impact study, full transparency on ownership, operations, recruitment, and business relationships, a complete hazardous materials and remediation report, and meaningful consultation with the broader community. Meaford's character, infrastructure, and long-term sustainability need to come first. As this is an election year for council in Meaford, I trust the decisions of this magnitude will reflect the concerns, expectations, and long-term interests of the community you represent. Thank you for your time and consideration. I would also like to say that we did start a petition. It may not mean much, but we have over 450 signatures, and I have them here with me as well, along with a bunch of supporting documents. But I also sent you guys all the letter as well. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Shoemaker, the clerk will accept your petition, and if you would leave it with her. Next, I'm going to call on Helen Soames, who will be joining us virtually. And I'm going to ask if someone has a phone that is playing, please remove yourself from the chambers. It's hard enough to hear in here. So Helen Soames, are you online? Unmute, Helen. You are muted.
Hello, now can you hear me?
Oh, hello, Helen. Just let's do a little voice test for a moment, just to be sure that you're not overwhelming us. It can be hard. Let's just say a few words and see how you sound.
How am I sounding now?
That's good. Just don't be quite as forceful because you've got lots of volume and we can hear you plainly. So please go ahead.
I've been accused of just that many times. My name is Helen Soames. I'm the owner of 142 Eliza Street, opposite the former Georgia Bay Community School main entrance. Although this evening I'm speaking to you from Toronto. Firstly, I would like to thank Mr. Baj for sending someone to clean up the litter of scrap wood and plastic and broken traffic cones following our telephone conversation. I don't fancy being the neighborhood watchdog, but in this case, the last straw was watching one of the traffic cones rolling around on Eliza Street for 5 days in March before anyone dealt with it. I felt I had to speak up, and I'll take you at your word, sir, that you will send someone more regularly to keep an eye on the property. Nothing I'm about to say is much different than either the previous speaker or comments that have already been filed with council, but I feel that they still need to be said. I ask council to seriously consider the negative impact this proposal would have on the neighborhood. A college campus with students living on site here in a residential neighborhood with what could amount to around the clock traffic and inadequate parking on site, not to mention the disruption during the construction of these 3 dormitories. Council, please consider this seriously. Let's talk about parking. The planning justification report defers to council on this matter, so I ask you, what about parking? The report states, and I quote, as mentioned, 120 parking spaces will be provided. There are no standards, however, for colleges or dormitories, and so there is no provision to which the proposed parking arrangement can be evaluated. The operator of the college, however, is satisfied. He's satisfied that the 120 parking spaces will provide sufficient parking for the students, teachers, and other employees. And it's understood that most students attending post-secondary schools do not have automobiles. End of quote. But we're talking about post-secondary school students, adults, typically living away from home in dormitories or rental units. Meaford is not North York. It's rural Ontario. There's next to no public transit. I challenge the notion that these students will not be driving vehicles to campus. If the college achieves, and it's a big if, the projected enrollment of 200 students, if the proposed 120 parking spaces is insufficient, then what? Neither Eliza Street, nor Aiken, nor Richmond Street, in my experience, are wide enough to safely navigate with on-street parking. The proposed amended zoning is far-reaching. The list of allowable uses is long. The sentence that sets off alarms for me in the report reads, quote, "This will allow for some flexibility in the possible future use of the site." End of quote. It's this possible future use that concerns me. Meaford has no assurances what the site, in particular the dormitories, once built, might be put to down the road. So Counselors, please consider the impact a college campus with dormitories will do to our residential neighborhood. I fear the negative impact of such a development, the impact it will have on both the quality of life we are trying to hold to and our property values is in jeopardy. I ask you, what zoning nightmares might you be creating for future councils? And thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Alan. Next, I'm calling on Robert Fitzjames, who is also joining us virtually. Are you online, Robert? Yeah, can you unmute? You may be muted.
No comment.
So is Robert Fitzjames there?
No. Go past.
Sorry, I missed what you said.
Oh, listen. We're okay. Our questions have been answered.
Okay, thank you very kindly. Thank you. So is there anyone who wishes to speak who did not pre-register? Go ahead, sir, just give us your name. Yeah, yes, at the mic. Yeah. I want, yeah, yep. So, yes, no, right there, and you've got a
Oh
microphone.
my God, I wasn't ready to talk this soon. Mayor Kettner, council, neighbors, thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Patrick Egan. I'm a commercial broker here in Great Bruce. I actually represented the Blue Water District School Board when they sold the school. And I'm here because I think you need to hear, or deserve to hear directly from the person who ran that sale. And I want to tell you a couple of things in hopefully a very short period of time. First of all, how it was sold. When the board put it on the market, it went through 7 levels, call it 7 levels of Dante, right? Like it goes to the community, it goes to the fire. They went through a very, very thorough process to which everybody declined the purchase. Then it goes out to the public, right? So nobody wanted to buy it for long-term care facility locally, et cetera, and town didn't want to do that, et cetera. So anyway, my point being is that it went to open bid, and the open bid was there was 6 proponents, and sorry, bear with me here. I apologize. I'm a little nervous. So I received 6 offers, and I'm not speaking on any authority from the school board at all. This is totally me on my own. So 5 out of the 6 were developers, and I want you to hear clearly that that the bidder who promised to keep it standing was the one who won the contract. They ultimately chose the offer that kept the gym a gym, the classrooms, and the cafeteria. Every other offer ended with the building coming down. Now, that being said, they were all comparable in pricing. Just everybody came in almost exactly the same zone, but this was kind of the cleanest deal and the most interesting. And largely, as I've got a little bit of an emotional attachment to the building, architecturally, I find it interesting. There's a lot of history to that building, and I know how much it costs to build a building like that, and saving a building like that is sort of coming from my heart. If a developer had have bought that, it would have been a protracted process. We would be talking here about somebody coming in and possibly building up to the 14-meter standard, multiple units and high density. But ultimately, as you've seen, the market has kind of gone a little bit sideways. It's quiet, and a lot of these developments have stalled out. So we could be sitting with an empty pit there right now, rather than somebody still trying to push a school. So just want to keep that in mind. So we still have that building because the man who bought it has a special place in my heart. And so I don't know if anybody's seen a 3D walkthrough of it, but that was my documentation. I don't know. Has anybody seen the full 3D walk through. You can actually walk through the entire school, every single room, and look around and see everything that's there, and including the beautiful piece of art in the main lobby. And the second is he paid for it in full. He pays his property tax, and I'm sure when this thing gets going, he's going to pay more property tax. He answers his phone. I understand he's away because of a family matter, but the proposal he submitted it was originally a technical college. So I can give some answer to one of the questions that was brought up was the Toronto Excellence School. That was the name before I got to him. So I'm out there marketing a school for sale to somebody who wants to build a school. And this fella was looking in Orangeville, he was looking around. I said, come on up to Meaford. Let's build a school in Meaford. And so I'm the one who brought him. He already had the name. So that's not disingenuous. That was already in place, just so you know. Originally, he was very much interested in, because he's in technology and he's built a technology company that integrates all these insurance things, his intent was a technical college. And I think right now he's tending more towards the practical trades, has been my impression from him. And also going through the process is very, very difficult with the province to get. So he hasn't changed his goal. I'd say I know that there's questions in this in the room about what exactly he's going to do, but he's spent he spent several years now with his own money patiently waiting for the provincial ministry that moves at its own pace. And so he's not cutting corners or doing anything. He's trying to he's being more patient with our bureaucracy, respectfully, than most, if not all of us would be. So the provincial college authorization takes years. It's not his fault. That's the system. While he has to keep the building alive. Heat, insurance, security, maintenance, costs real money every month. And the only way you can do that, I guess, is to bring tenants under institutional uses. So that institutional use is a very narrow one. It's the previous use is a high school. I mean, institutional, if you looked at other communities, institutional has a whole list of them, and I'm sure that list that's been provided is a fairly standard institutional list. I don't think he's chucked any uses in there I think our local list is quite limited, but respectfully, you guys need to decide what uses are allowed there. So I just want to say that I've already been getting calls for like a daycare, for example, taking up a seventh of the building. There was cooking schools, lots of different concepts. But anyway, so if this really works, it isn't about saving a building. A working campus at Eliza, or I call it 125 Eliza because I have a house at 120 Eliza. So anyway, so I've got a house across the street. So it means that teachers, instructors, maintenance staff, food service, security, administration, real jobs year-round in Meaford. It means builders, local contractors, retrofitting classrooms, affordable student residence. It means that these students are spending money at town, at the grocery store, at the harbor, at cafes. It means property tax revenue from the town instead of, quite frankly, a tax-exempt public school. It means trades and skills are training for our own kids, the ones that we keep losing, because let's be honest, our kids leave Georgian Bay. What's here for them? And only so much room in trade programs that are an hour and a half away. I have 3 kids. I'd love for them to live and thrive here. A campus here means a kid from Meaford can stay in Meaford, get certified as a personal service worker, an electrician's apprentice, a chef, an early childhood educator, a paramedic, a dental hygienist, a brewer, or cyber security tech. And these aren't theoretical. Across Ontario, former schools just like this are running a teaching brewery, distillery. We've got apple cidery around here. We've got wineries around here. Student-run restaurants at Niagara College. There's the Culinary Institute of the Arts down in, I'm going to say the A word, America. But anyway, a community cultural hub, paid, theater, daycare, arts, community hubs with possibly food bank, family services, daycare, right now climbing gyms in old gymnasiums, indoor farms in old greenhouses, maker spaces in old shop classrooms. So every one of those operates as an institutional use in some communities. I did some research on the internet. So none required the kind of obstacle course that Mr. Barge is ultimately being forced to run through. I think Meaford has a chance to be on that list or be a cautionary tale, not another roadblock to a unique and innovative opportunity. And finally, I already said it, is I own Eliza across the street, and I have no problem with them being there. And I love the fact that that there's an opportunity for walkability downtown. And you know what? If public transportation is an issue, that's one of my biggest complaints about this zone is we should have buses going between Collingwood and Meaford, and my kids should be able to get to Blue Mountain to be able to work a job there and come home safely at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's, maybe public transport's the issue, not saying no to a development. So thank you very much. That's my time.
Thank you
Love all
very
you.
much. Does anyone else who did not pre-register wish to speak at this time? Yes, sir. Just take the microphone and identify yourself.
So I'm a little unsure why I wasn't registered, Helen. I'm Dennis Moore. I wrote a letter, I submitted, I asked to speak. But anyway, it doesn't matter. At this point, I'm a little stunned. I'm trying to regroup. I just heard a huge litany of wonderful projects in curriculum that I understood is not even relevant. So why look at the better side of the coin when you can't look at the negative side of the coin? Within the community, there has been a lot of discussion about the negativity or the negative aspects of the program, of the possibilities of the program, of the history of the owner. None of which I want to bring into the argument now because there's people better researched on the topic than I am. But my concern goes back to the days of SkyDev, when the neighborhoods in Bouchard, Marshall, and Bridge were up for grabs. The whole identity of a neighborhood has been there for years, up for grabs by a corporation that come in with the wonderful promise and the negotiation of talking back and forth to arrive at a solution that would address some of the community's concerns and maybe even add something positive to the community. I wasn't directly affected. I live on Richmond. But I was concerned because, well, we're right around the corner. And the sanctity of a neighborhood, the preservation of older homes, the properties, the people who move in there, the care that they take in ownership, all of those things were up for grabs. And I was watching a town, I was watching this council to find out where are they going to fall. And guess what? Totally surprised. They didn't fall on the side of neighborhood. They didn't fall on the side of the people. They didn't fall on the side of the residents. And it may not have been your fault, or you might have not even been there. It might have been the tough guardrails that planning has, what you can talk about and what you cannot talk about, what you can weigh in on, what you cannot weigh in on. But these are people, this is a neighborhood. Our concerns are about a very big change. This isn't a small change, and you're not dealing with the Blue Water District School Board. The Blue Water District School Board was a benchmark. They're a good neighbor, they're accountable, they're reliable. This is not the same. This isn't even a market that is, the wannabes, all of the wonderful cooking schools and all of those other things. I ask you, why is a residence necessary? All of the things, there's more than 10 or 12 things on that list being proposed that absolutely do not need residences. Those wonderful things that could happen in our community out of that school and out of the well-intentions of the owner are still possible. They're totally possible without a zoning change. And I would say the zoning change is a mistake. I would think that the zoning change is the thin edge of a wedge. I would think the disappointment that we saw at SkyDev, where a wonderful project, green space, underground parking, low heights, orientation to the lake, ownership, condominiums, rental, parking spaces on the surface. Everything thrown out, all of the hopes, all the discussions dashed. What's going to happen in this situation? I have no trust in developers, contrary to what a wonderful person, man who presented is. But I find that plan as a matter of convenience for the owner. That traffic study, I didn't, honest to God, 382 pages. I was a little busy with something else. And there were other people that were very interested in what was happening with traffic. One of our speakers tonight. But when I look at that report and say, I don't think it mentioned much about the development on Bouchard or the traffic impact on Bouchard Marshall Bridge. I don't think it mentioned what would happen to St. Vincent. I don't think it looked what would happen to my street on Richmond if the Blue Water District School Board goes ahead with plans for a K-4 school with a nursery. Now that is a public need. That is a neighbor who is proven in Meaford. Those impacts, I'm sure they would consider and look at traffic and they would monitor and they would do a good job of it. I don't feel the same confidence in this enterprise. I don't see why we have a need for residences. I don't see why we need to support the density. I have other specific issues. I don't think they were supposed to, I mean, the site plan was talking about drainage. I can tell you 4 homes in that area whose backyards are completely flooded every spring. All it takes is a misalignment of a snow pile to avoid drains that were put in there intentionally. But on contrary to someone's opinion, that they could get through the owner, I haven't been able to. Mr. Egan, I sent a form letter trying to get in contact with the owner regarding those matters and never did. Then I was surprised when I tried to contact, I never got any owner, I never got any answer, but there was this whole deal about how they were wanting to invite commercial spaces into the school. And I thought, well, I thought it was zoned instructional or institutional. But there was a representation of the town of eagerly welcoming business into the school. So I'm confused. Where is this owner? Where is this owner on what his intent? Is it to take this opportunity, to take this zoning and to exploit it in every direction possible? Anyway, I'll stop there. But I will submit again because I've learned a lot tonight and I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate my neighbors because they're here because they have concerns and they have real concerns about our neighborhood. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Judy Hamilton. I'm a new resident in Meaford. I have a question that I know you can't answer, but I'm very curious. You're proposing to bring 200 new people into Meaford. I think that's 12 months a year. If the pump storage project goes through, you're going to bring another 400 or 500 workers in, along with all the people involved in that project. Where the heck are they all going to go and drive around and eat and all that stuff? So that's a big consideration for me.
This gentleman over here.
Hi, my name is Jerry Moody. Just in context, also, as we all know, Base Meaford has just become a major training center. There's going to be double the number of soldiers being trained on Base Meaford every single day.
Bus after bus.
So you're working on an infrastructure that is unsustainable as it is. So start adding this in. However, that's not my point. My point is there's a legal liability here for you to make sure that you understand what this business model is. Let's say, take him for his word, which I don't. I was basically a consultant to engineers, to entrepreneurs in business startups. There are so many red flags with this project that it would never get past my desk on first blush. But let's pretend that it is going to be a trade school. So we have 200 students being in trade school, probably mostly men. They're going to be here. What do you do in Meaford if you're a 20-year-old in the evenings, on the weekends? But let me ask you this question. This is where the liability comes in. Tell me, what's being built across the street? Come on, you all know it's being built. A junior high school. Do you not want to know who's going to be in those buildings across from a junior high school? Because what you approve here tonight, you are liable for.
Go ahead.
My name is Linda Hoare and I live on Denmark.
Just bring your microphone down a little bit there. Good.
Yes. I would like to know, first of all, with regards to traffic, we're just looking at the high school and this development. There is also the development down the street. And St. Vincent is going to become a major thoroughfare. If all this goes through, what happens to St. Vincent? Like, I've already noticed an increase. I've already felt I've lost my neighborhood because when they were excavating down at Aspen Shores, the whole summer was just listening to dump trucks come up and down the street. So I've already felt that there's been a loss of neighborhood. I haven't heard anything with regards to the lighting of this building. Like, for people who are bordering on that, are their backyards going to be lit up like they're in downtown? Like, what's the lighting like for that? And like the previous gentleman said, you're going to have a lot of young people around. And have we studied some of the issues that go with dormitories on campuses? I mean, I think that needs to be done. I think it's a lot of development in one section of Meaford without adding all the others and a 2-lane Highway 26. I think those are things we have to consider because it's already busy, Highway 26. And you have developments out at the other end and this, so it's a lot. And I really think it needs some serious, serious consideration on your part. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, come forward.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Greenfield. I'm coming here more on a different aspect to talk about students. I hear from my fellow residents. I have 4 children, and they are students. We know that Career Canada College, private college in Ottawa, was closed in 2019. Bankruptcy. CDI, CBC has done an investigation on this past college. Canadian Career Education and College. The list goes on. We're not here to discuss about accreditation, but you have students. They indicated that this is not just for foreign students, but what about the ones that are domestic here? What would be left for them? If there's no accreditation, it would leave them without merit. Your students here. We didn't hear about a cooking institution. We heard the first part is business. When studying business, you don't need to spend overnight. This isn't a medical care facility training nursing staff. There is no reason to have dormitories. And again, as an educator, I am very concerned having a junior high across the way. That's not safe. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak or ask a question? Yes, go ahead.
Hello, good evening. My name is Tina Veer, and I live nearby the proposed site. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I understand we're here to discuss the proposed zoning amendment, and I'll speak to that, particularly in terms of what it could enable going forward. I don't support rezoning this property for college dormitories because the proposed use is tied to an applicant that is not currently approved to operate as a college. The applicant has been denied registration under the Ontario Career Colleges Act, and that decision was upheld by the License Appeal Tribunal in 2025. From what's on public record, those decisions weren't about minor or administrative issues, but about broader concerns related to compliance, public interest, and integrity. So I think it's fair to ask whether it makes sense to approve zoning based on approvals that aren't in place, especially when those approvals involve more fundamental concerns than simple technical fixes. And I understand that it was said earlier that zoning amendments can be made even under those circumstances. However, based on the reasoning for their application to be blocked, it doesn't seem likely that that application will be approved anytime in the near future. And this is on public record if anybody wants to look, it's on ontario.ca. I also find myself wondering about the basis for the application itself. My understanding is that zoning applications move to a public meeting once they are considered complete. And again, I may have gaps in my knowledge here, but in this case, the proposed use is tied to a college that does not currently have approval to operate. So I'm trying to understand how that use was evaluated at the completeness stage and what exactly is being contemplated here. If this is not in fact a viable college use, then what is the zoning change really being asked to support? More generally, what has come to light through this process does raise questions for me about how this project and any future development of this property would be carried out. As someone who lives nearby, I'm not only thinking about this specific application, but about what happens next. This is an older structure, and any major renovation or demolition would need to be handled very carefully, especially when it comes to materials like asbestos. I know there are rules and processes in place for such matters, but as someone who lives nearby, I'm relying on that work being done properly and responsibly in practice. Given what has come to light through this process, I would want to see a very high level of care and attention if any of that work moves forward. A lot of oversight, please. For that reason, I would encourage council to approach not just this application, but any future requests related to this property with a high degree of care and scrutiny under the circumstances and with a clear focus on protecting the public interest. I also wanted to address something that the applicant stated earlier this evening about how licensing is not required for operating programs 40 hours and under. So if their application to become a college ends up remaining blocked for the foreseeable, are they then planning on having an overturn of students, a whole new group of students every week, if they're allowed to operate under 40 hours? So that the other concern I also had was, it's my understanding, again, I might have gaps in my knowledge, that part of the reason that the school was abandoned was because of it, due to its construction, it is very difficult to retrofit it for modern technology. So if it is going to be used as a technical college or any modern kind of programs, how are they planning on remedying that if it wasn't fit for a new school for the Blue Water District? Thank you for your time.
Jennifer, I'm not sure that we got your last name, Jennifer. Here. Thank you. Party in the back corner there.
Hi, my name's Jen Gico Pendleton, and I sent a letter in already. But one thing that was not mentioned is the policing. We already have drug trafficking going on Eliza Street, SCOPP. They're there twice a day at approximate times. So put 200 students on that with drug trafficking already going on that street. That's a huge concern. And then kids on the old track. Imagine the disaster. Like, what do we want to be known for? Do we want to be own sound?
I don't see any more hands at this point. I think if we had.
Hi, Jeffrey Krellinson on Aiken. I'm totally new to this. I just have a question. At the beginning, you said this is about zoning and it's not about the college. So why are you even debating about zoning
We're trying
without
to be.
knowing whether the college is approved?
We're
It makes
trying
no
to
sense
be-
to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me either, sir. The thing is, we're trying to be, make sure that everyone has an opportunity, but really, had all of you registered, we would have probably sought an agreement that each person speaks to maybe 2 issues, and once we have all the issues covered, we would have maybe 10 speakers instead of 20. So
I didn't understand the logic of that.
So
that's my question. And can this group talk to the province about their concerns? Is there a process for that?
the public can do exactly that if they wish.
No,
for
but
sure.
you made it possible. You created a structure for us to be able to talk. Is the province doing that? And are you working with the province? Excuse me, I have a pneumonia, so my voice is weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand your question, but
Do you communicate with the province about this issue? Is there an ongoing discussion?
I believe the province gives us a process and we're executing the process.
So they're the enemy.
Any other speakers?
Hi,
Lower your mic.
Okay. Bonnie Kelly. I live right beside the school. Like dead on. Anyways, on St. Vincent Street, a lot of traffic. The guy said it's okay for the traffic. It's not. Because we live there, we see the traffic, the people that are going down, flying down St. Vincent Street Hill. The kids are walking on that street. I have grandkids with me. They're walking, playing. It is a dangerous zone. That needs to be dealt with before the school goes forward.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to move on then. And next, I'm going to ask if any members of council would like to have their input. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to start by expressing my gratitude to all of you for giving up your time to be here tonight and to share your comments in relation to this proposal. It's really important that we hear your thoughts. So thank you for doing that. And I know it's hot in here. I wanted to ask a couple of questions that have been raised, and I understand exactly what we're here to talk about, which is the zoning. But a couple of things have come up, and I think it's important that we ask those questions from this side of the horseshoe and allow staff or perhaps Mr. Davidson to respond. So first of all, we heard a question about wastewater capacity. So I just want to ask, does the capacity still exist at what I will call GBCS when it was prior operating as a school, or does it require new capacity? So I'll just start with that question. Mr. Mayor, I'll come back with a second if I may.
And that question is of our CAO, is it? Sorry. Good.
Thank you, through you, your worship. So when we reviewed this at the pre-consultation stage, I can't state that the existing allocation of the school remains, except that was how we looked at it. So we looked at the increase I know that our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works wasn't here at the time, I don't think, during the pre-consultation stage, but we looked at it as what is the increase from the school, and that's the same way that we looked at things like traffic impacts and et cetera, because we know that the school had an existing impact. So that's the way that we've been calculating. It would be more based on the dormitories and the increased use.
Thank you, Denise. That's helpful. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, one more question for Mr. Barge, if he's still with us, or perhaps Ron Davidson could take it. But we see the list of permitted uses under the industrial side of the zoning, the institutional side. So I just wondered for clarification, Mr. Barge or Mr. Davidson, can you tell us which of those uses specifically that you intend to go forward with on this site?
Yeah, the proposal before council is for a college with dormitory. The reason for adding those other uses is because it's like it or not, it's standard. I mean, in an institutional zone, there are a number of uses. If you look in other municipalities' bylaws, this is what's permitted in institutional as an institutional use in an institutional zone. Some of them are commercial related. Armin Ender, he can speak to this if he cares to. He has no intentions of using of those other uses. We put that in the zoning bylaw amendments. Again, to add some flexibility. Now, having said that, as I probably didn't make myself very clear earlier. I think it's before this comes back with a report from your planning staff to council. I think the owner and I have to have a chat about striking some of those uses off the list because it's obviously it's causing grief.
And thank you for that, Mr. Davidson. I think that would help immensely if we had a specific list of the intended uses so that residents living near this site could understand exactly what is being proposed.
Completely understood. Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first of all, thanks to everyone who came out tonight. I know it's going to mean some late dinners for most of you, but obviously you have great concern about this proposal. And Ron Davidson, if you would come back to the light, please. Do have a question for you. And always a pleasure to have you here, Ron.
Yes.
Been here a number of times.
Appreciate some air
The
conditioning, but
traffic impact study. Can I ask when it was completed?
I apologize. I don't have that information in front of me. Perhaps one of the planners do. I just don't have my report with me. I believe it was done within the last 12 months. Maybe we can ask Denise.
So the traffic impact study was originally done maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, but it's been updated with our feedback. So we've provided feedback. We've had our peer reviewer reviewing the study and provide comments. So it has been updated a couple of times.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Denise. I'm just wondering, the time of year for a traffic impact study can have quite an effect on the numbers. Certainly, January, maybe not so busy on those streets, but if you get into midsummer with traffic from the harbor, traffic going to Memorial Park down Aiken Street, and it is Aiken, it's not Aikens. Traffic to the pool, traffic to the ballpark. And in the future, when we start looking at traffic to a 4-story hotel and 3 4-story apartment buildings and a JK to grade 3 school right across Aiken Street, this traffic study of today or whenever it was done is going to change. The numbers are going to change dramatically. And I think that's something that our council has to consider in the future. The only other question, if I may, Your Worship, that I'll address this to Ron, because I know you can answer this one. If indeed this zoning application is not dealt with within 90 days, can it be challenged at OLT?
Yes, council has so many days to render a decision. They don't have to. It could just remain a open application. But then the landowner has the opportunity to appeal the so-called lack of decision to the Interior Land Tribunal. Yes.
Councillor Yurg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Greenfield kind of asked my question, but in terms of, yes, if there is nothing made within that date, they could, if we actually render a decision, they can still carry that to the OLT as well, I presume?
That is correct. There's 3 different ways to get to the Interior Land Tribunal. First one, Councillor Greenfield just mentioned, lack of decision. The second way is if council approves the application. Now the Planning Act has been changed. An agency could appeal it. I'm not sure which agency would care to do that. And the third one is if council denies the application, then there's a 20-day appeal period in which the applicant can appeal to the Interior Land Tribunal.
So forgive me, does OLT override?
Oh, yeah.
Mr.
So whatever happens here. Probably asking that question, OLT, that's how it works. Okay.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thanks to the neighbors who've come out. I've been past that former high school that I attended, and there's a few other members of council who went there. And the artwork was talked about in the main foyer. That was there when I attended, so it is a well-seasoned piece of artwork. But my question is from a businessman's point of view. Why are we here tonight at this time after the proponent obviously has been spending a lot of money? I have seen repairs to the concrete on the roof line. I've seen repairs to the roof. I have seen repairs that he's been constantly doing, and I've heard recently he's working on the cafeteria. He is spending money and spending money, but we're here tonight after he's invested that to give him a go-ahead. I wouldn't do that in my business. If I'm going to put an addition onto my business, I want to know that that can fit before I start spending money. And I'm seeing a lot of money that's being spent, but we're here tonight, years after he's bought the property and done a major influx of cash. So why are we doing it now down the road? It seems that this should have been asked very, very early on. So all of the neighbors know, and he would know what he's committing to financially and what the end result of it could be. Why is it taking so long to come to council?
So is that a question to our planning staff? Or?
Yeah, to Banner. Thank you.
Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I can't speak to why the applicants applied now. It's certainly something we recommended happen sooner, but if someone's not prepared to make that application, they may be preparing their materials, figuring out what they're going to submit. So I can't speak to their exact timing of when they applied, but it was known that they did need to apply.
Councillor Forder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, and good discussion so far. My question's to staff. Obviously, we're here to not judge the intent of the business, but we're here to look at whether. And so this is my question. I want to know from staff if, based on the scale, the intensification, and the permitted uses, is staff confident that this project meets Meaford's official plan, particularly as it relates to compatibility in like a lower density residential area. I'd just like to get some comment from staff on how that applies and fits in with Meaford's official plan. Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so staff wouldn't prejudice our own review either by providing an answer now, but whether we think it meets the official plan policies. We certainly haven't finished our review, but we're happy to, as we've noted, provide links to the report to anybody who's looking for that report ahead of the council meeting so they can see it. Council will have it obviously about just under a week before the meeting. And so we can make that available for people if they're looking for that report. And it will can include all of the planning analyses.
I have a question, if I may. Sorry. Oh, yeah, go ahead, finish if you have more questions.
Mr. Mayor, and I want you, Mr. Mayor, to tell me whether this question is appropriate or not. So our first guest speaker tonight said that they had gathered 450 signatures. So my question is, once it's been turned over to our clerk, is there a heading on the top of that sheet of what the question was asked for the people to sign their names to? Am I allowed to ask that since we've received it?
I think so, sure.
Yes, I can speak to that if you wish, through your worship. This is a petition request that reads, "We, the undersigned residents, property owners, and/or electors of the municipality of Meaford, respectfully request that council decline zoning bylaw amendment application Z01-2026 for 279 St. Vincent Street, or defer any decision until the concerns outlined below are fully addressed." They do list the reasons for the petition and some suggested council actions here. They speak to essentially what's been raised by the folks in the room today.
My question, I think, is perhaps for staff or maybe for Mr. Davidson. Mr. Davidson has said that the proponent would reduce the number of uses on his wish list in the CBA. But my question is, how do we get that reduced in order to, like, what's the mechanics or the process for getting this accomplished so that, we don't end up at the OLT, so can someone explain that? Yes, go ahead, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So typically what we do is provide feedback to the applicant as part of the public meeting and our review. And sometimes we recommend something change about the application. In some cases, the application doesn't need a change and someone applies for a zoning amendment asking for something, and that's what we recommend approval for. But in many cases, we do give feedback suggesting changes. And so that's what the next step would be, is we provide our feedback after we finish our review to the applicant. And often we'll meet with the planner or speak with them on the phone about our recommendations, and they can have a chance to work with their client.
Does that make sense to you, Ron?
Apologies, sorry. Yeah, officially, the request would come from us. Denise can and her staff can make recommendations to us or suggestions to us, but ultimately it's our application. But I'm telling you respectfully, you'll hear back from us.
No, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. I personally feel that the list was overreaching substantially, and I think that has largely brought the crowd out tonight. But anyway, I hope that that can be arranged. And I just want to make another point. Because very early in my political career, which began 8 years ago as a councillor, I discovered that there was not much notice of a planning development for people in the whole municipality. It's this business of 120 meters radius. I understand it, but I think I wish there was something we could do as a council to broaden the area that would get notification of a notice such as this, so that first of all, the word would travel faster because more people would know, and people do have. The closer you are to a situation, the more, I think, entitlement you have to comment on it. But a place like Meaford, I think the kind of community we have, we really need a broader possibility of notification. Perhaps, I don't know, for example, whether there was a newspaper ad placed in this case. But anyway, I'm going to ask you, CAO Everett, how practical is it for us to, as a council, to pursue a little broader notification approach in this type of thing?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would say that when we're talking about the planning and the Planning Act, it is actually provincially legislated of what the actual notification and periods of notice are. Meaford's extremely lucky. We're one of the last remaining municipalities that actually has its own newspaper to be able to place. It's actually required under the Planning Act that the advertisement goes out into a local newspaper. So we are actually told by the province what the actual notice is. So I do know that there always runs the risk, especially from sort of the OLT side, that when you start going over and above notices, that can be held. It's not necessarily great for us if we're challenged at the OLT because we're actually not following the legislation. So the notice piece, obviously council does have the ability to pass its own notice of motion bylaw and policy. That is something that council, you can create different notice periods for different types of notice requirements, but the Planning Act is very, very heavily legislated that way to ensure that there's a level of consistency.
So we should speak to Mr. Vickers.
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Denise, does the conversation with Mr. Davidson about rewording the permitted uses, does that reset the time period or is that part of the process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it does not reset the time period. It's just part of that 90-day period.
Councillor Ernest.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just sort of joining on the conversation of how things are in a top-down way controlled by the province. I'm curious about whether or not, knowing that the educational licensing part of this proposal is a parallel activity compared to the zoning. It seems that there are some linkages kind of between those two tracks, like a ladder. So I'm wondering if there is any ability for the municipality to reach out to those regulatory bodies, those licensing bodies of the province, to have a more fulsome dialogue so that we can be making this decision in collaboration with them, and we'll have a good sense of what page they're on, and they'll know what page we're on as well.
Can you venture an opinion on that, Denise?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not aware of a process where we normally collaborate with them on where they are in their stage, but we can certainly try. I think it's really important that for your benefit that you separate the two things, because you can imagine that in many cases, like if the examples given, if this was in, say, the city of Owen Sound or the town of Collingwood or a different municipality, a person would just buy the lot and it would already have a certain number of permissions, which may include private college on it. That doesn't mean you automatically get to operate it. So all we're talking about today is whether or not the college is an appropriate use on these lands with the dorms, et cetera. And so I don't think we have to ensure that they're 5 minutes away from approving it or anything like that before you'd be able to have a level of comfort in rendering your decision. But I'm happy to try to reach out and see where we can get in that, to find if consultation's possible or collaboration's possible.
Thank you. I think we're ready to wrap this meeting up. And I think I should ask Mr. Davidson if he's anything he wants to add at this point in time. And Mr. Amaninder, I don't know if he's still with us, whether he has anything he wishes to say, a final word. Then I'm going to thank everyone for attending this meeting and sharing your thoughts on this application. This matter will now be referred back to Development Services to follow up on any additional information required from the applicant based on the matters that were raised tonight. Once staff are satisfied that they have all necessary information needed to provide a recommendation on the application, a detailed planning report will be brought back to Council to assist us in our decision-making. This report will evaluate how the proposal does or does not satisfy the provincial, county, and municipal policies that must be considered as part of Council's decision. It will also explore the various public and agency comments received regarding the application, noting those tools which may be applied in order to address concerns that are raised and to mitigate potential impacts on nearby properties. And I just want to emphasize, if you would like to receive notice of a future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the Planning Services Division, and you can do that by email at planning@meaford.ca. And I believe we have another meeting following this, so we're going to recess. And I again remind you that if you're interested in the other matter, you're welcome to stay. Okay. We're going to resume our meeting, and this second part of the meeting is to learn about a proposal to implement the Administrative Monetary Penalty System bylaw in the municipality of Meaford. The purpose of the meeting is for council to receive information from staff and to hear comments and questions from the public, and no decision will be made on this matter today. Those in attendance for today's meetings will have an opportunity to speak in person or remotely if pre-registered through Zoom. Additionally, this meeting is not structured as a dialogue between speakers and council or staff. However, staff will take note of all questions and respond to them through a future public report to council. So I'm going to call today's public meeting to order. Public meeting to consider an administrative monetary penalty system bylaw for Meaford. And I'm going to ask Holly Hines, Manager of Enforcement, and Margaret Wilton-Siegel, Clerk Director of Legislative Services, to give us a brief presentation about the proposal. Holly and Margaret.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff are proposing that the municipality of Meaford transition the issuance, processing, and adjudication of some of the regulatory bylaw offenses away from the traditional courts system under the POA to an administrative penalty system, or APS, as provided for in the Municipal Act. Staff are of the opinion that there are several key benefits of this transition, with the focus on making the legal process more efficient, user-friendly, and less intimidating. Further, there will be a positive impact on the county court system in terms of making court resources available for more serious matters. An administrative penalty system will provide for similarly open, transparent, and impartial process as is currently in place with the POA system, maintaining the fundamental principles of open court and due process. So, as Mayor Kentner noted, we are joined by the Manager of Municipal Enforcement, Holly Hines, and together we'll explain the administrative penalty system, including an introduction of the proposed bylaw and how the process would operate. We hope to hear feedback from the community and council and receive questions prior to a further report to council on this proposal.
So next slide. So I wanted to talk about how we use the enforcement within our municipality and using the 4E principles of enforcement. The Municipal Enforcement Division takes a balanced and consistent approach towards enforcement, seeking to gain compliance with municipal regulatory bylaw requirements through various methods, including community engagement and education, voluntary compliance on a case-by-case basis, and enforcement, such as fines, if voluntary compliance is not achieved. You'll see that the 4E principles are engage, explain, educate, and then we enforce the legislation. As you can view in the attached slide, the division attempts to achieve these principles enforcement while still delivering customer service excellence and being committed to continuous improvement. So what is the administrative penalty system bylaw? Well, first of all, it's governed under the Municipal Act, under the regulation of 333-07 administrative penalties. It's a streamlined local process that replaces the traditional court system for addressing minor violations of designated bylaws under the APS framework. It enables the municipality to manage these matters directly and to more efficiently through a screening and hearing officer process, which we will discuss in detail further along into the presentation. The app process is comprised of following components. So you have the bylaw, then we have designated bylaws to be applicable to the apps framework. Then you have supporting policies, which is what we're required under the Municipal Act to have, and there's 6 policies that we have to create. There's prescribed forms. There's 3 of those prescribed forms that need to be implemented. We have a screening officer, we have hearing officers, then rules of procedures for those hearing officers, and then, of course, the penalty notice we have to create and deal with.
So how does it work? Let's get into that. Under the structure of administrative penalties, when an enforcement officer issues a penalty notice to a person in violation of the municipality's bylaw, the penalty becomes a balance owed to the municipality. It is similar to the judicial process as the Provincial Offences Act, but instead governed by the municipality through process and policy. Once issued, there are two options available to the defendant, which include either paying the penalty or contesting the penalty notice through a screening review with a screening officer. This could be equatable to the justice of the peace in the Ontario Court of Justice. If unsuccessful in that process, the defendant can appeal the decision of the screening officer to a hearing officer, which is similar to the judge of the Ontario Court of Justice in that process, for an additional review. The decision of the hearing officer is considered final and binding. Once the penalty is confirmed, payment is to be made to the municipality. If the penalty is not paid, it is considered as a debt to the municipality.
So the difference between court and apps. So you'll see on two sides, the court system, what we regularly right now is to deal with a Part 1 ticket. It's very similar to a penalty notice, but the Part 1 ticket is the official notice of the provincial offenses notice that if you were enlightened to get a speeding ticket, that's the Part 1 ticket. So we issue those as well right now that are under our bylaws, under the Provincial Offences Act. By going to the app system, we would issue a penalty notice, very similar in context, but then it's governed by the municipality. The other thing with the penalty Part 1 is it's in the court system, and then it'll be paid to the court system, not to the municipality. The slide offers a side-by-side, and how it does is it proposes what is required and what is the difference between both. Offenses laid by the municipality of Meaford are currently issued through the means of the Provincial Offences Notice and adjudicated through the Provincial Offences Act. These are heard in the Ontario Court of Justice. The POA prescribes this process. As a result, under their regime, there is limited opportunity for a municipality to provide a revised process that to be more of. So the court system creates the process, and then they can adjourn it, and then they can create it again. Where we have that opportunity that we can create it within our own vision and have screening officer, hearing officer, and then it's also a much more quicker process than waiting 8 months to a year to deal with, where we can deal with matters that are minor in nature between 2 to 4 months.
So just a brief background. I like to do the research. So in 2022, the Law Commission of Ontario published the Modernizing the Provincial Offences Act report, which conducted an in-depth review of the POA system to determine if a more cost-effective, fair, and accessible system for adjudicating provincial offences is available through the administrative penalty system. The report examined how to make minor provincial infractions less burdensome for the court system and highlighted that the administrative penalty system allows municipalities to control timelines and manages disputes internally, removing the backlog from the court system. The Law Commission of Ontario suggested that a greater respect for the rule of law and administration of justice would be achieved if court and judicial resources were reserved for more serious matters. So by way of a background, I just wanted to include the legislation on this slide. So Bill 130 came into effect in January 2007, which permitted municipalities to establish a system of administrative penalties initially for parking offenses. On May 30th, 2017, Bill 68 received royal assent expressly authorizing municipalities to establish administrative penalties for failure to comply with any bylaw passed under the Municipal Act. And then on December 14th, 2017, Bill 177 received royal assent and included amendments to the Building Code Act to establish administrative penalties for the enforcement of property standards bylaws and property standards orders. So you can see the continual sort of extension of that authorization. Holly's briefly touched on this, but this slide really highlights some of the notable benefits in the administrative penalty system process, as summarized, related to experience, efficiency, and financial impact. Really, as we've already discussed, current POA trials are often scheduled months in advance, extending public wait times for resolutions and tying up court resources. With this process, a request for a hearing to challenge penalties would be scheduled likely within a few weeks. Fines recovered under the current POA system process are shared between the municipality, county, and province. Transitioning to an APPS process provides a positive impact on the receipt of payment and improves the municipality's ability to collect fines. Under APPS, the fines would be paid directly to the municipality, as well as any administrative fees that apply within the bylaw.
So the key component. Okay, so the key components of the proposed apps bylaw, you'll have the issuance of the penalty notice, the penalty notice dispute process, the screening review process, the hearing review process, document service, response timelines, and designated bylaws. To elaborate on all these, the issuance of a penalty notice identifies the contravention for the designated bylaw. So it provides you that contravention. The penalty notice dispute process establishes the steps involved in disputing a penalty notice in alignment with the applicable regulations. This includes the procedure for situations where a person responds or fails to respond to the notice. Screening review process defines the process for the initial screening of disputes to determine whether a penalty notice should be upheld, amended, or canceled. Hearing review process is the next step if they're not satisfied with the screening review process, outlines the formal hearing process for those wishing to contest the penalty notice following the screening review. Document service specifies the procedures for servicing documents to the affected parties, ensuring transparency and proper communication. The response timelines sets out the timelines within individuals must respond to a penalty notice, and also that's identified within the draft bylaw itself. The designation of bylaw provision identifies specific bylaws that will be subject to the apps and outlines the penalties applicable for each offense. So the proposed apps bylaw details. Implementing the apps in Meaford requires enacting a bylaw. Establishing the system of penalties as required under the regulation, the proposed draft bylaw was included in an attachment in tonight's meeting agenda. As summarized on the previous slides, this draft bylaw details the entire process. Later on in the presentation, we will expand on applicable designated bylaws, but wanted to highlight the structure of the draft bylaw for reference. Schedule A outlines the administrative penalties for short form wording for penalty notices for the parking control bylaw for vehicle-related offenses. This is only a placeholder, so it's our opinion to wait not to move forward under the penalty notice at this time because there's other agreements that need to be addressed with the Ministry of Attorney General. Schedule B outlines administrative penalties and short form wordings for penalty notices for designated bylaws. And we've included 6 bylaws with the initial phase of administering this process. Schedule C details administrative fees, i.e. searching MTO records or searching other records as well, late payments, non-appearance fees, and other charges such as title searches and NSF check fees. This is very similar to the court process itself, and they apply those fees as well through the court system. We would just apply them in-house to ensure we recoup those costs. So the many to foster bylaw compliance, the system will implement escalating penalties as well for repeat offenders to deter recurrent contraventions. These penalties cannot be punitive, but are intended to encourage compliance if necessary. The municipality will default to the Provincial Offences Act for persistent noncompliance through Part 3 court attendant summons using the POA system. The next 3 slides provide a more detailed overview of the draft bylaw processes and timelines. I've got another slide, everybody. Margaret really wanted me to talk tonight. So the penalty notice. So we have to create that penalty notice. And let's begin with it. If implemented, enforcement officers will issue a penalty notice for violations instead of a provincial offences notice under the POA. The information contained on the penalty notice is specified, outlined in the draft bylaw and on the slide for reference. This penalty notice will only be given if the 3 of the 4 E's are not met through our notice of verbal or written warnings. We will always apply the 4E principle prior to any penalty notice to any member or any person.
So the draft bylaw includes the process for requesting a review of the penalty notice. So this review is referred to as a screening review and must be requested within 30 days of the penalty notice. The draft bylaw also includes a provision for extenuating circumstances to request a screening review outside of the 30-day window. Through this review, the screening officer would review the facts and may either affirm, cancel, reduce the administrative penalty, or extend the time for payment of the administrative penalty. So that's sort of step one in the appeal, if you would look at it that way. The next stage of that is called a hearing. So if the recipient of the penalty notice chooses not to accept the resolution offered in that first initial stage, the review of the screening officer through the review process, they can request a hearing before a hearing officer. So again, this request must be received within 30 days of the screening decision, with a provision for extenuating circumstances to request a hearing review outside of that 30-day window. This hearing review replaces the trial court option currently used under the POA system. These hearings would be held virtually, though there would be a provision to request an alternative on a case-by-case basis. The hearing officer would be an independent person appointed by staff to ensure impartiality. The decision of the hearing officer would be final and binding. So as Holly talked about already, under the current POA system, municipalities must seek approval from the Ministry of the Attorney General to introduce new fines or revise existing ones, and those don't form part of the bylaw. However, under APPS, the penalties are contained within the designated bylaws, and Section 6 of the legislation outlines that penalties cannot be punitive in nature, which is really important in the setting of those penalties. Staff proposed to develop a schedule of penalties based on municipal comparatives for council's reference, though feel it is important for council to remain neutral by not being involved in the setting of the penalty, similar to how we have to appeal to the Ministry of the Attorney General. To further encourage compliance, as we've already talked about, escalating penalties would be introduced for repeat offenders, designated to continued violations by the same individual or business. In our review, the approach of escalating penalties seems to have been successful, implemented in other jurisdictions, including Collingwood, Town of Blue Mountains, and larger cities of London and Oshawa.
So we'll go with the designated bylaws. We've taken a selection of designated bylaws. As mentioned, there is a number of designated bylaws that could be proposed to be implemented with this system. Staff are proposing a staged implementation that would include 6 initial bylaws. These would include noise bylaw, nuisance bylaw, property standards bylaw, open burn, sign, and yard and boulevard maintenance. 2 of these 6 bylaws already have approved short form wordings, and the other 4 bylaws were in process to apply for short form wording. Therefore, instead of proceeding through the POA system, these have been strategically selected to be considered as part of the APPS bylaw for this first phase. As previously noted, at this time, staff have not included the parking control bylaw as mentioned, but have drafted the APPS bylaw with the intention that it can be added to the schedule at a later date.
So I think it's important to we've tried a lot to kind of explain the structure of the bylaw as it's written so that it's familiar when it's being read through. And so just to reinforce that, we have created the placeholder for Schedule A, and Schedule B will have that ability to then add future bylaws. So we're not coming back and replacing, we're inserting bylaws if council chooses to expand the program at a later date. So that's really what we're trying to just kind of reinforce with the messaging here. So there are some anticipated costs for 2026 should council wish to move forward with the administrative penalty system that we anticipate could be incorporated into the current budget. New penalty notices would need to be created for the enforcement team. There are some associated costs with retaining a hearing officer, pretty much on a retainer is the structure that is typical, and legal costs for the draft bylaw review. Depending on the timing for implementation, it could be noticed that costs may partially offset the revenue from the issuance of penalty notices and other fees established as we've discussed through this APPS bylaw. Recognizing that this is a new process, staff will manage or propose to manage the current the program should council wish to move forward with it with the current staff for the remainder of 2026 in this first proposed phase with the 6 designated bylaws that were previously identified by Holly, while managing the impact accordingly. Staff would then prepare additional information for council's consideration on potential future costs to expand the APPS into other designated bylaws after the initial implementation through closely monitoring the program and quantifying additional metrics where possible. So this public meeting is designed to explain the administrative penalty system and to hear feedback from the community and council. Should council choose to move forward to apps, the slide on the screen outlines the next steps staff would need to take in order to implement the full apps process. Transparency and fairness are integral to the process when establishing a system of administrative penalties. And as Holly's already talked about, this includes the creation of policies, which are sort of at high level to prevent political interference, address conflicts of interest, ensure financial transparency, and provide a framework for handling public complaints related to this system. Aside from the mandatory policies, there are a number of required bylaws, forms to be created, as noticed, the penalty notice to be drafted, and other logistics for the judicial process to be developed in order to finalize this program. Work would be done internally with IT to ensure the program is implemented appropriately, considering areas such as online hearings and an online payment system. A full communications plan would also be developed to update the website and public materials to inform residents and businesses about the change and this new process. Recruitment would need to be taken, including the retaining of a hearing officer and training our current municipal enforcement staff on the new process and procedures. It is anticipated that the full implementation of what we were kind of calling phase 1 would probably take about 4 to 6 months. To have a full implementation of all of these components. So following this, staff Holly and I intend to take questions and comments from tonight's meeting in order to develop a comprehensive staff report for council's direction on this. Recognizing that there's been a lot of information and it's a very different, though similar process, which I hope we've helped to explain. We look forward to answering any questions, and if we can't, we're happy to take those away. And as I say, when we bring back the report for council's review, we will answer them at that time as well.
Thank you, Holly and Margaret. There have been no pre-registrations to speak in person at the meeting by members of the public. Is there anyone who does wish to speak who didn't pre-register? And I don't see any takers, so what about council? Questions, concerns? Councillor Yuri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Holly and Margaret. That was very thorough, good. Just a quick question is what happened to amps? I thought it was gonna be amps, not apps. That confused me. I'm just curious what the qualifications are for the hearing officer. Is that a standard thing that already exists in the province that we just tap into? And is that, what's the regionality on that?
Go ahead, Margaret.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Urig. The first, I will address amps versus apps. So AMP is a short form often used and initially used for our asset management plan. So to avoid some sort of confusion, that was the first reason. The second was an interesting one that a number of other municipalities had. I had in presentations we had heard. It's not about the monetary component. So by making it the administrative penalty system, it's less about revenue generation. That's obviously not the point of the enforcement system. And so by removing monetary, we sort of thought that the two reasons would be better to brand this as apps, which some municipalities certainly have done recently. In regards to your question about a hearing officer, we have been in touch with a number of municipalities who have implemented this program. Typically, it seems to be that it's posted as almost a job that one would apply for, though other municipalities have gone through different recruitment or procurement processes to retain one or a roster of hearing officers. So as an example, we have a shared through connections, we've received a couple of job descriptions that we would post. Should we go that way? But in discussion internally, we'll figure out what the best process is. But there really isn't a provincial sort of recruitment that's been pre-done. It really is at the municipal level, if that answers your question.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Coming back to the monetary side of things, I'm just curious to know, this will have an impact on Grey County and their revenue. So do we provide sort of a notice to Grey County to let them know that we are proceeding with apps? Or do we just go ahead and do it? Or just how do we share that news with Grey County?
So we only use the Provincial Offences Act when there's a trial or first attendance. So that's under the part 1, and this is a penalty notice. We still will use the Provincial Offences Act and the court system for part 3, more serious in nature, and that's majority of cases that we deal with now that go to the court system. Part 1s are very rarely challenged. In a handful, if I've issued maybe 20 of them, maybe 1 may be challenged. That's because of the process of engaging and advising the persons why we've issued that notice to them. But some people have hardships, extenuating circumstances, and can't make that payment, so they have an early resolution, and that's when our hearing office here would look at those extenuating circumstances. But there would be very minimal impact to the court system with regards to reducing this program.
Other questions? Councillor Ennis?
Well, but, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to clarify, I have 2 things. I just want to clarify for myself. So this, if, it's more of a proactive system than a complaint-based system, right? Or is, so if somebody's seen to be non-compliant, but nobody in the neighborhood has mentioned it, is that something that would still be enforced, or would we be waiting for that complaint to come in?
Well, currently, we're through your worship to Councillor Ennis. We don't propose any changes to the service level that's been provided for the system. What this is proposing is the penalty notice, the change of the PON, issuance of a part 1 to go to the court system, or we do it within house through the penalty system.
Okay, thank you. And then I was just going to offer some thoughts about, yeah, for the hearing officer. I kind of like the idea of them being not in the municipality. I imagine that would be a job we wouldn't, even if somebody local was willing to do it, I wouldn't want to put that on anybody. So I don't know if there are like firms similar to having the integrity commissioner that could offer that, but if there are multiple options, I'd like to see one like that.
Another question, and I'll go to Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just one more question. We know that the STAs are listed as a future. Can you give us any idea of timeline for the future, such as moving forward with the STA AMPS? Do you see that happening in 2027 perhaps, or?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keaveney. At this time, I don't have an update on that project, but the way, as I had said, that we've structured this proposed bylaw is that when the short-term rental, or if the short-term rental bylaw is passed by council, it is a designated bylaw that would be able to be incorporated through the APPS program. So although at this time we're not involved in that project, we've ensured that any future bylaws, and another example would be the sewer use bylaw. So any future bylaws considered by council that would fall under the regulatory bylaws could be incorporated easily. So that's really the way that we've structured this. As for the timeline for the STRs, I wouldn't want to speak out of turn without getting some information from the staff members who are working on that specifically.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, ladies, for your presentation. A couple of questions. If there are a repeat charge or repeat charges for the same violation, does the offender still have that screening and hearing opportunity in spite of the fact that this is the second, third, 10th time that?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Greenfield, that's a rules of procedure, and they do have that process to adjudicate that as well through the screening and hearing officer. The escalating penalty is to promote compliance, but not to be punitive in nature. So you have you have your first step, okay, here's your penalty notice. Oh, still we're back here again. So we would escalate it to the next phase of penalty notice. And if they're still non-compliant to our actions with our penalty notice, we can escalate it to the Part 3 summons and go to a court process. And then you can escalate it further in more stricter penalties and provisions.
Go ahead.
If I may, and I know short-term rentals are still work in progress. But for instance, if someone who's renting an STA, has a large bonfire that they don't have a fire, permit for, or even lets off firecrackers, how do you deal with that? This is a person, like, I'm thinking if it's a resident who pays taxes and they don't pay the fine, you can add it to their tax bill. I don't know if you can do that. Sometimes we do that. But if it's just somebody who's up for a weekend and, you know, there's a violation and, you know, if they're from Timbuktu, I don't know how are we gonna follow up on that? And it seems to me it's gonna cost us more than what we're gonna generate.
At the same time, I just also add to that question, people who lease or rent, because they also wouldn't be paying property tax directly.
Through your worship to Councillor Greenfield and Councillor Ennis, I think the principle is the definition of the law that you're speaking of. So if you're speaking about the open burn bylaw, it is to the owner of the property. It is not to the owner. It can be also to the owner who set fire, but it also can be designated to the owner of the property. So it would be directly, if they did not pay that penalty notice, it would be go in lieu of taxes onto that property. If it's not moving forward and if it's it'll be a debt to the municipality. So if the municipality, if they want to do any business within the municipality, that debt is owed to the municipality. Very similar to the POA, as you probably have heard that the Grey County is $13 million, I believe, outstanding penalties now in 2025 and in 2026, they mentioned. So that it's a process that they're trying to get the money back, but we have that capability to put it onto the taxes.
Councillor Yorick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we talked about the hearing officer. Can you just maybe elaborate a little bit about the screening officer? Paid position, obviously paid for by the fines, et cetera, who gets the joy of being that person?
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Yorick, I believe that the joy of that person is sitting beside me. Initially, what we propose, as I had said, is to see the volume of this process and manage it with current staffing. So that's sort of why the phase one approach would include 6 designated bylaws. The screening review, we believe, and we will pilot this, can be conducted through the the manager of municipal enforcement with her experience, and it's often a position held by an employee of the municipality. We would have built-in redundancy. There would be a second person if she's on holidays, for example, but primarily that role would be the manager position. As we did say, based on some quantifiable metrics and time and offsetting costs and council's desire to expand the program, that maybe would change with workload and other factors. But at this time, for the remainder of 2026, that is our intention.
I have a question. Councillor Ennis and Councillor Greenfield have both alluded to this. Are you aware that some of us are definitely thinking of moving to a more proactive mode, and especially with respect to property standards? So, which should come first? Should we, do that and then go to the AMP system, or should we get the AMP system instituted and then kind of adjust our attitude toward violators in that category, especially?
Through your worship, I believe that the apps, I said amps. Margaret's got me trained to apps. I know, I'm all about amps, but we've changed. But through the process, it's completely two different separate views. Property standards is one law, where apps does several laws that could be incorporated into this system. Property standards is one of the designated bylaws. So there is a better component for us to do more penalties with the property standards bylaw. We've created the designated bylaws and we've created the short form wording right now as a draft proposal. But it is, I would say the apps program would be, it's two different variables, because the apps program is governing what the penalty system is, where the property standards bylaw, proactive to reactive enforcement, is a service level. This is just a change in process of enforcement, where proactive and reactive enforcement is a service level of how we're going to manage that enforcement, where this is just a judicial streamlined process of the apps program.
Okay. If that's all the questions, then I'm going to thank you, Holly and Margaret, very much. Any last word on it?
No, thank you, Your Worship. We realize there's an enormous amount of material to absorb and also that it's quite hot in here and it's been a long afternoon and evening for members of council.
Glad
So
I just
if
made-
there is anything, we appreciate your time and thought towards this, and we certainly want this to be the right fit if council chooses to move forward. So if there are questions in the next week or two that you come across, please be in touch. Probably just emailing clerk@meaford.ca for members of the public who might be watching this. As I say, in the next week or two, we're going to be developing the next step, which would be the report for council's consideration. So having as much feedback, if this seems to be the right fit or not, is really valuable to see what the next steps are, because it is an enormous amount of work to move forward with substantial benefits. So we have to weigh both. So thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. And as I say, if there's any follow-up questions or comments, we appreciate those to integrate into the final report for council's consideration on next steps.
Very good. So thank you for attending this meeting and sharing your thoughts on this application. This matter will now be referred back to Legislative Services to follow up on any additional information required based on the matters that came up around the table today. Once staff are satisfied, they have all the necessary information needed to provide a recommendation. They will be brought back to council to assist us in our decision making. Now, one last thing, we have a confirming bylaw. The motion is to be it resolved that bylaw 2026-40, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting of the council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Meaford, be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Yorick and Councillor Greenfield. All in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried unanimously. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.